our second seminar in room A. We have Chase Lawyers. They're a multifaceted entertainment law firm. They deal with athletes, influencers, actors, singers, every single category that you can think of, trademarking, everything that has to do with the entertainment industry, and we are so happy and proud to have them as a partner. We're very excited. And we can't wait to hear their advice on contracts, film, TV, and YouTube contracts. So this one, pay attention. This one's important, guys. They're all important, but this one, you know, we're talking about real stuff here. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Alex and Greg. They are the partners of the law firm. Thank you so much.
Hi guys, my name is Gregory Bloom. I'm a partner at Chase Lawyers. As it was mentioned, today the way we would like to run this panel, we want to give you guys as much information as possible. So we're going to go through, and if there's questions, just raise your hand. You know, we want to address it while it's fresh in your mind. And then we're going to try to save some time at the end for questions, because I know there's going to be a few of them.
One other thing to point out, my name is Alex, pleasure to meet you guys as a partner at the law firm. The one thing, we don't necessarily have slides in front of us, so we're going to try to give you pointers and try to cover some of those topics to make sure that we do have slides. Yes, you're going to see them on the recording. You're going to see them on the recording. Right? We're going to get to it when we stream it. But the main idea here is kind of like try to follow the general principles of what a parent of an influencer, of an entertainer should kind of keep in mind, because that's generally our goal, to educate, right? You won't have all the knowledge, you're not attorneys, but you need to be able to know when to call on, right? So that's generally our goal. And as mentioned, we're going to be talking about film, TV, and YouTube contracts and everything relating to audiovisual productions. And the first step of the equation here is we're all looking to, you know, have a successful career and a long-term one as well, right? In order to have a successful long-term career, one of the things we always recommend entertainers do is look at their art, which, you know, is the thing that they're making their money with, as a business, right? Look at your endeavor, entertainment career as a business from the get-go. And now, not every influencer or athlete or model or entertainer has the benefit of having a parent who cares, right? A lot of them go into the space and start streaming at 16, right? And start, you know, doing YouTube channels at 18, and then by the time they're 20, 21, they've lost all their money, right? So all of those things happen if you don't have proper structures, if you don't have proper legal structures, if you don't have proper contracts, and you allow people to take advantage of you, right? Because at the end of the day, as you're entering the business world, as your child is entering the business world, there's going to be a lot of people who are looking to exploit. There's going to be a lot of people looking to monetize, right, in any way, shape, or form, commercialize what should be, you know, your child's career and ownership and intellectual property. Now, to speak of ownership, you know, I'll take it over to Greg.
All right, so to follow up on what Alex was saying, I'm going to start with the most important rule in the entertainment field, which is he or she who creates it owns it. Unless there's a piece of paper that transfers that right, he or she who creates it owns it. So if your child is in front of the camera, they own what we call their right of personality. They have to sign that right away. All right, if your child is a photographer, they own the photograph. They can't sell that photograph without getting the approval of the person in that photograph. Okay, so whatever your creation is that you are bringing to the table, you own it until you sign a TV contract, until you sign something to be in a commercial, music video, YouTube production. So as you're thinking of these things, there's going to be two ways you can look at it. Am I the person who wants to own these rights, or am I the person who is going to be giving these rights? And there's limitations and asks on both sides. So every contract is going to be different, and you have to understand what to look out for, because again, he or she who owns it has the negotiation power.
And this is something that we run, you know, all of our clients through, whether they're child entertainers or adult entertainers. It's, you know, make sure that you have paperwork, because ownership doesn't follow, you know, creation, or per se, your participation in it. You want to ensure that ownership doesn't follow money, it follows the paperwork, right? So the fact that you paid somebody doesn't mean that you own something that they created. Now, whenever we talk about audiovisual productions, oftentimes where parents first meet with those contracts is going to be in the setting of a commercial, right? Somebody wants to film a shoot or create some content that later on is going to be used in a commercial setting as an advertisement, and so forth. And here the main kind of distinction is, as a parent, you got to remember that there's a difference between usage and distribution. Meaning there's a difference between session fee, somebody paying you to participate and create content, and then there's a difference with that content then being reused, and that content being clipped, and that content now being on all the social media platforms with brands associated with it, and logos of those brands right next to your child's face. And that is what happens when you don't secure proper approval rights, when you don't limit the usage rights, when you don't control what is going to happen after the shoot, pretty much. So you want to be wary of terms that say perpetual, meaning forever. You want to be wary of terms that say, any and all types of media now existing or later down the road invented. This is where you want to be as strict as possible and give people as few rights as possible, because the more of those you retain, the more you can monetize. At a certain point, I was a counsel for a child's cartoon brand, and they had a monetization spreadsheet that listed out all the different types of media rights that were available to them, and that was about 50 of those. Internet, video, SVOD, TVOD, online, offline, TV, all sorts of different formats in which media rights can be used and commercialized. So you want to be cognizant of what you're giving up whenever you're participating in those productions.
And one thing that I want to make clear is, a lot of this is about leverage and opportunity. If your child is getting their first opportunity to be in a commercial, you want to be as restrictive as you can with the rights you give away without ruining the opportunity. Okay, but you just have to be educated enough to know what you're reading to say, okay, for now I'm willing to give away this to get the opportunity, but as you get more people following you or you get bigger in the industry, you can start to limit what you give. Okay? But things that you're gonna come across, appearance releases, okay, image rights, editing approvals, future use. All of these are things that you want to keep in mind, because to Alex's previous point, you don't want someone to have exclusive rights. You have to make sure you're not signing these things away, because you want to be able to do more things in the industry and you don't want to limit your child's opportunities. So again, the contracts are important, what's written on the paper is important, and it's important that you guys are educated for your kids going into these opportunities, knowing when someone is talking to you that what they're saying is wrong. Because that's how these people will start to take advantage. They think that you will bring it to an attorney, they're talking to you in corporate lingo and entertainment lingo, and if you know what it is, it's going to be easier for you to weed through what you should be doing and what you shouldn't.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think a very significant advantage that you guys have is that you're giving your children an incredible advantage in terms of time. Because usually when entertainers come to us, it's not when they're starting out, it's not when they first made their nice chunk of change, it's when they first had their own dispute or legal issue or partner or something going bad, or them infringing on intellectual property and now having a lawsuit in their hands, right? Oftentimes we are brought in to fix problems when they're there. Now you have an ability to make sure everything is done properly from day one and that your child is protected, and whenever they turn 18, there's so much more opportunity for them to make this happen, right? A lawyer is not gonna make or break your career, that's gonna be your talent and solely that. But we might be able to help you not lose it once you've got it, right? And making sure that you have proper practices to ensure that you own things, right? And at the end of the day, it's about ownership. Now, some of the clients we represent today, I'm actually in the process of negotiating a deal for a family-owned YouTube channel. It's an influencer family that have a couple of kids, and they're doing a financing deal where they're using the revenues from their channel to be able to obtain financing and get a nice 7-digit amount to be able to then invest back into the content, to be able to grow, to be able to scale. And that is the ability that you only get when you own things, when you're able to show that chain of title, when you're able to show that you own the videos, that you're monetizing them, and so forth. So at the end of the day, we want to have legal structures, we want to have intellectual property protection, and we want to have contracts. Those would be the 3 main pillars of that ownership and protection component that you can afford the benefit of to your children.
So the entertainment business, everything we're talking to you about today from a contractual aspect is for when your kids are minors and when they reach the age of 18 and beyond. But there's a small portion of things that you should know, some basics, if your kids are minors and the child labor rules in entertainment. Things such as your children should be on set for only a limited scope of time before getting a break. Okay, I believe it's 4 hours, and depending on the age, but they have to have some type of break. If it's multiple days, they need to have their time for school. Okay, they have to get food, and meals for them, and so just little things that are going to keep the people who are hiring children from taking advantage of their time and their efforts, and making sure that your children are well looked after while they're on set.
One other thing here to point out is that you always, and this is kind of a little bit of a, it's a messed up thing that us as lawyers have to do, but we're always looking for the worst case scenario, right? So that's kind of something that we have to do as a measure of the profession. So here, think of, if you have a production, if you have a set, it's not necessarily your kids that you're, or yourselves that you're worried about violating the laws. It's about making sure that you don't expose yourself to a claim from an ex-employee or somebody who was part of it but then felt that they were wronged because they did so many great edits and they don't get 50% of the ownership. How is that so, right? You never know how entitled or how disputes arise generally, so you want to prevent that by ensuring that you follow the laws and follow those labor laws and others. Now, some of the other laws that kind of play very much so into the child entertainer's life would be Coogan law, which we might have heard about. It was created back in the 30s to cover an incident of a child actor not having a dollar to his name upon reaching 18 years old, and that's sounds like something like a scary tale from the 30s, but I just recently saw a YouTube video of a young influencer who's now 18, 19, was complaining that exactly that happened to her just now. Now, the difference is that the Coogan law, well, it's a state law in California that requires a specific amount of proceeds to be dedicated to the trust account, 15%, by the parents in favor of the child whenever the child is engaged for labor with a third party. Now, not all of our instances are going to fall into that, so we have a second set of similar laws that has recently been starting to be implemented in California, Minnesota, Illinois, and Utah at this instance, but those would be the child content creator laws. California ones require you to have a 65% of the gross proceeds dedication into trust if you're making more than $1,250 and your child participates in more than 30% of your content. Utah has a rule that says that if you're making more than $150,000 and your child participates in the content at all, you have kids' content, then you should be dedicating that 15% to the trust. Now, in Florida, there's not necessarily specific legislation requiring you to do so, but it's something about making sure that you as a parent are thinking in advance for your kid and securing those very same instruments contractually, because you can do exactly that. You're going to have every single one of your contracts have a provision for a portion of the funds to go into a specific account that is going to be established by your estate attorney, right, that sets up the trusts and sets up the parameters for how those funds are to be released to your child once they reach 18. So all of that is about creating those structures to make sure that they're successful, to make sure that once they reach 18, they don't have zero, right? And even when they do and they have things, right, and they earn things, they know how to manage it and know how to properly maintain that wealth if we're at that level of wealth.
So part of what we want to talk about also today is how do parents accidentally lose money, for their children by not having the proper legal structure set up. In things such as not having an LLC or a company set up, doing things individually. To Alex's point, you have to be able to track all the money, and you have to be able to separate your professional assets from your personal assets. So you want to create an LLC, or what they call a loan out company, to loan out the services of the child. And that way everything's trackable. So getting these trusts, getting these things set up so there's no legal discourse about anything. Not reporting taxes. They're still making money, they still have to pay. That's the worst enemy to have, is the tax man. Yes?
When you're talking about setting up the LLC and primarily having it for your kids to do what they do like now, how do you, to your opinion, what's the best strategy to pay your kid, or what's properly like pay your kid so that you can take advantage and maximize your expenditures while making the best tax benefits?
Well, so what we generally recommend all entertainers, and honestly, this is how we have our own firm set up. We all have independent LLCs, right, as professionals that are professional LLCs, PLLCs. That's the same exact process that we recommend all entertainers, or child entertainers do. Set up your own company, have it be taxed as an S Corp, meaning an S corporation, but still maintaining the LLC format of legal entity. What that'll allow you is to then hire a payroll service, just online, you go and you pay them $30 a month, and they perform a monthly payments of salary to your personal account. So what that creates, it creates an LLC. LLC contracts with everybody. Everybody pays the LLC, and then LLC pays about 20% deduction to 20% of that income in salary split in 12-month increments. What that creates is no self-employment tax on the remaining 80%. So that's the easiest way to save money as an entertainer, instead of just going and having everything go to your personal account, have everything go to LLC, pay a portion with the salary, have the rest be just dividends of income that's less taxed than that smaller portion. That is the most basic stuff, and then kind of the further you go, depending on what types of businesses you have. Do you have, how big is the business? Is it just one income source? The moment we add an income source, especially it's from a different place, let's say we've had social media income and now we've added merchandising income. Okay, there's value in maybe separating that income source into a separate LLC, into a separate business bank account, so no liabilities attached to any other income sources. If you had 8 of them and somebody sues you, the only thing they can get is that income source, that LLC, and not everything else that the child might be, might have access to. Go.
So what I hear you say is, if you have an umbrella company, LLC, under that umbrella company, you can have different segments of that company. They have a different segment of plans in each of them, or are you saying something like local?
No, you don't necessarily need what you're looking at as a parent company.
Okay.
You just need to what we're recommending is you separate each income stream. So to Alex's point, if you're doing merchandise, that would be Merchandise LLC. If you're doing music recording, it would be Music Recording LLC. Online content, you separate it, because if someone comes after you for one, someone's in a music video, they don't like the way they look, they can't go after your merchandise money. So it just separates the liabilities and separates the assets.
So just one more question to that.
Yeah.
So say you have, for example, my son have about 5 of them right now, right? So what you're saying, again, just tell me if I'm not making any sense. So say for modeling, it would be a modeling LLC, a different company under that umbrella. And then for acting, it's going to be acting LLC under a different umbrella. Is that what you're saying?
And if the talent is all going, so it's more for the revenue coming in from
Like a t-shirt?
yes, like more separative categories.
Okay.
But if he's acting and modeling and doing print and video,
Yeah.
that could all probably be under one umbrella, because it's for his physical services.
Like his book, his t-shirt, his
Right.
little thing.
That would be separate.
Okay.
But
So I was going to, so is it easier to do an LLC, or is it better to do an S4 in
Oh.
the beginning?
So So LLC and corporation is a type of legal entity, right? LLC simpler, corporation shares, bylaws, very more difficult for investors and more numbers of shares. Now there's two types of taxation as well, which is the LLC can be your entity, but you can select the taxation of an S corp. So that is usually the combination of a legal entity and taxation that allows for simple paperwork. Don't have to do 1,400 pages of different share purchase agreements. And on the other hand, the S corp simplified taxation. So that's usually the account of LLC S corp. But with all of that said, please make sure that you do have an accountant, an actual CPA. We're looking over your paperwork. We're attorneys, and we A, have CPAs ourselves, and B, direct people to CPAs whenever things come, to IRS. It's not, once again, the middleman that you want to be messing with.
Yeah, and the part B, at what point though, do you really need to create an LLC? What is the income level? Because if they don't have a major contract, they're not seeing regular guest star.
Zero.
Do you really need to just go start an LLC as soon as they start?
Yes.
Or do you really want to wait to get your very?
Well, having any income at any point, right? I think it's a question of the goal here is that if you have incomes, think of it as like X, no matter what that is, $10,000 a year, you can make sure that you're paying less taxes on that already by having the structure, because you're taking 20% of that and then distributing it between 12 months in salary to yourself. So you're already saving on the taxes on the 10K. Now the question is, I think the actual analysis there, does it worth paying an accountant X in order to save, $250 in order to save $150? Probably not, but then at that point, that's the math associated with what are the services of the providers.
Because you also have to pay people to maintain it every year.
Well, no, the maintenance, well, that is kind of the general, this is something that if you want to limit your liability, we're talking about tax optimization strategies, but don't forget about the very, very important reason for why LLCs exist, limited liability company. It's there to limit your liability. So regardless of whether you do the S corp and the payroll and everything, having an LLC, having your contracts go through an LLC creates an additional benefit of that separation of assets between your personal account and your house and your mortgage and your car and anything that is related to the business. So think of it as having an LLC is great in itself because of the legal reasons, but then you can also use it additionally for CPA reasons. Something else, kind of what we wanted to talk about. What is actually very much so what you're asking about is that process and that flow of having an LLC set up and having payroll be associated with it and having 1099s or W-2s. This is where, you want to be aware of the option to do so. Now, at the end of the day, as a parent and as people coordinating and managing those businesses, which are the businesses of your children, it's up to you to determine at what point and at what income level do you consider this to be a business, right? Because there's always, at a certain income level, you're quitting your job and you're focusing on this, right? So there's that at the very least. Now, there's probably a much earlier step where you should take into account, like, okay, this is starting to make money. Let's make sure that we talk to an attorney. Let's make sure that we talk to an accountant. Let's make sure we set up the most basic, payroll software that we pay $20 a month that distributes that salary out. And then if you're doing all of those things properly, at a certain point it becomes habit, right? We're not here to kind of force you to, hold minutes of the board of directors or whatnot with your child. We're here to ensure that you know those simple, basic things. Money goes to the LLC. You want to have contracts. You want to avoid certain contracts and certain provisions. We'll talk in a little bit. And you want to ensure that you have that separation of funds between your personal stuff and, payment to service providers with Venmo and PayPal has to stop at a certain point, because then you're losing the money that you could have been deducting as expenses from your business. Right now, you're just paying it out of your pocket.
Any questions before we go on? Yes.
So let's talk just a little bit with the LLC. So at what point when you, for somebody that's starting, I know there's a sole proprietorship and there's the LLC. So for the younger kids that are just starting and want to start getting into paying themselves or building a company as a sole proprietor, which will you advise?
LLC.
Sole proprietor or
LLC, a sole proprietor is an even more limited scope of protection, and it goes down to the individual traditionally. So I would say an LLC for sure.
Yeah.
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
Do you just name it your child's name? They'll.
You name it, as long as it's not taken, you can name it whatever you want. There's a separation. Remember, the name of your business may not be the name of your brand, right? Procter & Gamble is the company, Crest Toothpaste is the brand that they own. So the two don't need to be the same.
Okay.
Is there something else? Yeah?
Just check on Sunday.
It's not working. They said it would be on the stream.
Yeah, if anything, I can
Yeah.
give the share to visual.
Yeah, we can definitely send it. Have them send it to you. You're welcome. So some other things just to touch on, when you're looking at a contract for your children, you know, I don't know who in the room are creators and who are going to be trying to own content, or who are out auditioning and going on the job hunt. So, okay, so when you are on the job hunt, there's some things that you want to look at when you're giving your rights away, is the compensation structure. You know, are you getting paid up front? Are you getting paid half? Are you getting paid down the road? Make sure that, again, you want to get as much as you can right around the time of the event. The term and the termination, how long are you giving this right to this company? You know, is it in perpetuity, which means that it can be playing when your kid, it goes from 12 years old when they're in the commercial to my age, which is very old. And so you want to limit that. You know, again, this all comes with your leverage. What can you do to get as much money for doing as little as possible and keeping these rights? The scope of the engagement, you know, what is your child responsible for? Do they have to show up on set 5 days in a row? Can they do it all in one? You know, all the ways that you can limit the access to put it into your favor. Who has the decision-making authority? Do you have creative control? Can they put out whatever they've clipped of your child, no matter how good or bad you may think they look? So who has those rights? Oversight, governance, just making sure that, you know, you try to maintain as much decision-making without harming what the company is trying to do. And future revenue streams. Can they use it down the road for something else, or can you maintain that to use on your own behalf? Things of that nature. So, again, we can talk about this on or offline more, but if you have questions, those are when you walk away and you have a contract, these are some of the things you should be looking for.
What about power of attorney?
Don't give it.
Yeah, never, you know, rule of thumb is never give away your power of attorney unless you have to. You don't want someone speaking on your behalf for anything unless there's a real necessity, and in those cases you could try to limit it, put limitations on it to very specific things.
I have another question, if that's right. So, say like, my daughter's been doing this for a long time. So in the beginning I was just like, yeah, photo shoots, yeah, you know. I have a lot of photographers that just have her image from when she was younger. If they chose to sell it, do they have the right to do so?
No.
Okay.
It
Even
depends.
if a contract
I don't know
was
what you
signed?
signed, again, I don't know.
Nothing was signed, so if like
No, if nothing was signed, then they don't have the right.
Okay,
No,
all right.
then you own it.
Okay, thank you.
And if they do, you sue them.
Yeah, that's good to know.
Yeah, one other thing to kind of know generally on contracts, right, and this is kind of goes to the question of like when is, let's say, a power of attorney is applicable, right? When is the exclusivity is applicable? When is, you know, granting somebody worldwide rights is applicable? What is okay to, you know, if you're doing a shoot for a single commercial, is it okay to have a perpetual attachment of name, image, and likeness to it? So all of those things is something that is not necessarily even legal knowledge, it's industry knowledge, right? Because when you look at 100 of those contracts every year, you start reading it and know as an attorney what is proper and what is not, what they should be asking you for, what they shouldn't be. And that allows you to have a little bit more of a kind of confidence in the type of deal you're executing, because some provisions that would be fit for one contract and the consideration you're getting, right? Like if somebody's giving you $10 million, you have that power of attorney, right? If we're, you know, properly structuring it, limiting it, and so forth. So you always want to make sure that you're getting the best for your buck, and you can't necessarily know that until you have somebody, you know, whether that be an attorney or a manager or a talent agent. And, you know, there's differences between them and different functionalities.
So do you need more than one? You need an agent and attorney, or do you need a?
Well, it depends on what kind of business, what entertainment field your child is at, right? Because if we're talking, you know, athletics, then an agent's functionality is very much so, you know, special and specifying and separated from that of the attorney because there's a specific functionality and specific licensure that the agents need to go through. Now, there's definitely some overlaps. I would generally say that there's more overlaps between, you know, managers and agents and business managers and booking agents and, you know, all of those different formats off. Now, this kind of goes to the same, like you want to be able to give people as little to be able to hire more people in the same way with exclusivity. So if you have a manager that's helping your kid with their dancing because they really know the dance schools, you don't also want to give them the exclusivity for the literary work in case your kid wants to write a book, right, or release something, because that's not their profile. So if your agent that you're going to, or if your manager that you're going to, has 14 different departments and they have people specifically tailored to each single one of them, and you have confidence and they have track record, cool, you can have some unification. But if you have people who are solely focused on one thing, make sure that you don't give them all of the rights and all of the exclusivity to be able to then hire competent professionals for those independent traditional fields.
I just want to follow up on that. I always tell my independent artist clients, in a basic way, your career is like a pizza. Okay, you only have so many slices you can give away before you go hungry. So you have to be very smart with how you give away that ownership. You know, if you're going to sign a manager and he wants to take 20%, he has to be able to earn that 20%. And if he doesn't, you have to be able to get rid of him. You know, because that's the difficulty with just signing away contracts or signing away these rights, or you're allowing someone else to have the right to do something that they say they can do and they don't deliver. So, yeah, so you really have to vet the, you know, even once, I wouldn't expect someone to hire me without at least going on our website and seeing what we've done, you know, calling and asking questions. So if someone just says, oh yeah, I can take care of it, you're giving away these slices, and before you know it, your kid's going to be doing all this work and making 40 cents on the dollar and having to pay taxes on top of that.
So just a quick question, going back to the LLC. So my daughter just recently got into acting. So with the LLC, should she have one for acting? Then she does brand ambassadors for like big companies, like.
I don't think that's necessary.
So just one, acting.
Unless she's getting it's pure sponsorships. You may want to separate it.
There might be a need for a separate
Yeah.
tool for us to actually go
Yeah.
into the specifics, because it does
That's something
depend.
that you guys will figure out.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
what it is exactly that kind of, what are the revenue streams? Are they coming from the same folks? Is it the same type of job that is being done? So all the, like, some things are easier, like, oh, you start producing, you know, you start going into e-commerce, you open up a shop, okay, that's easy, separate LLC, right? You have your, you know, music business, okay, that's separate because there's an additional IP asset that you're creating that you want to go through a separate LLC. Now, the brand ambassadorships / acting, theoretically, I would say they probably could go under single, let's say, talent loan out LLC, right? Like for every engagement that otherwise would be personal, they fall under that LLC. But then anything that you have as a separate, like, independent business.
And as you're going through this and you see yourself growing, you could always break off and do another one. You know? Was there a question? It depends what you're doing. I mean, I always, again, as the attorney, I'm always looking to limit the term, so you can either get back in there and renegotiate for a better deal upon success, or cut and go in case of failure. But for what? Oh no. I mean, yeah, I always, and it depends. I should, if it's a high-profile manager from a great reputable company, who's to say they're not going to do what they're saying? But I always like to have an escape hatch. You know, maybe if X hasn't happened within 6 months, we can terminate the contract. Just ways that, you know, listen, if everyone's doing what they say they're going to do, then there's no need for contracts and attorneys. But it's when there's an emergency, you have to be able to pull out a contract that says, here's why I'm out of this contract. So the term can be long, as long as you have some escape hatches along the way. No. I mean, again, as attorneys, we're always going to find that stuff and look to limit it and do what's most favorable for you. At some point, it's a balancing act. You have to know where you are on the range, you know, in the leverage range, to be able to say yes or no to things. But then there's certain things that we just can't allow, you know, because if it fails, you'll be taken advantage of.
It's a year.
Yeah, and also it's kind of, when you look at the contract, you always want to balance what it is that you're being offered against what it is that they're trying to take from you. Sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. The issue that a lot of entertainers face is that when you're starting out, you don't have the leverage, so you make the mistakes of executing the agreements that have those long-term effects, perpetual usage rights, ownership granted to labels, and now you have, if you're Taylor Swift, you have to buy back your catalog and all that. So those are generally the kind of, not mistakes, it's just the reality of not having good leverage in the beginning of your career, which is also important to kind of follow as far as, well, A, you can have a great attorney who can help you establish a more significant leverage because of knowledge of the industry. You can also wait to a more later point in your career to have that leverage yourself. This is something that we tell to our music artist clients. If you're just starting out, you had your first track blow up, you have 5 record labels throwing $50,000 advances at you. Maybe if you're doing great and you don't need that, maybe wait a year, do a couple of more kind of launches, be a little bit more successful. Now you have $100,000 offers and $200,000 offers, and maybe you're making $200,000 and you don't need those offers. So now the moment you don't need something, that's when we get the best terms. That's when people start reaching out, hitting you up, and following up, because now you're an asset that is in need and demand, as opposed to being desperate and looking for opportunities and not having that leverage.
To that point, the more, remember, your asset is you or your child. So the more rights you can keep, the better. It allows you, as you are met with more success, to make bigger and better deals. But if by the time you've gotten to your 3rd deal and someone owns a piece of 80% of what you've done, you can't do much with that. So to as much of a pain point as it may be, you want to try and keep that independence as much as possible.
We should do a little step, a couple of steps away. One thing that I wanted to kind of touch upon is generally exit strategies, right? Any business, when we're launching a startup, right, is the advisors recommend, think about what's happening in 5 years. Are you exiting? Are you going to venture capital? Are you selling the business? Like, what's the end goal? You should be able to have a certain form of long-term strategy when you are creating your content, when you are executing these agreements, when you are creating those structures to ensure that you, as Greg mentioned, maintain as much ownership as possible, so that when you are at the stage where, let's say you've been doing this for 15 years, right? Let's say some kids are 10 and now they're 25. That's a pretty long entertainment career, right? Not all NBA players have that career, probably, a third of them and whatnot. Now, it's something that can lead to burnout. It's something that leads to you as an artist not being able to continue producing the same quality and the same consistency of content and keep pushing the pedal to the metal, so to say. So this is where you want to be able to have that previous work of securing ownership and contracts and registering IP play in your favor, because now you have an asset you can sell. If you have audiovisual works that you've been creating that are generating recurring revenue, there's going to be people looking to finance, license, and acquire that for a nice multiple. Yeah, the lifetime of copyright is an important element there, because whenever people execute some of these documents that have assignment clauses, right, or some of the ways how you can be put in a wrong spot is by signing something that has perpetuity language, right, forever language, or that language can be in the form of for the life of copyright, which is also, for all intents and purposes, for you as a person giving up those rights, the same as forever, because the lifetime of copyright is literally your life and plus another 70 to 90 years. So you're not going to see the end of it. If it's pretty much forever if you give something up in that copyright assignment context. So make sure to, if anything, limit it to a license, better yet, a limited term license, not a perpetual one, and better yet, have those specific kind of restrictions and KPIs and exit clauses as well.
You want to keep your child is on film. That film can be distributed for child's lifetime plus 70 years. That's the lifetime of his copyright. So, like in a movie, when you see that long list of credits, somewhere in every contract from Denzel to the guy who got coffee is a clause that says Paramount Pictures owns this, you know, for the life of the copyright. You want to try, if you want to try and maintain that right again as much as you can, to not lose the opportunity.
Yeah, I think we're gonna come to a certain point where, you know, we've talked about a lot of different kind of aspects here. We've talked about LLCs, money management, wealth management. It's important to have a team around your kid. It's important to have accountants, wealth managers, hopefully attorneys as well. Like once that reaches that business stage, or preferably even earlier, to know when to bring those people over. So I think at the end of the day, we can kind of bounce with some of the other topics, but we wanted to make sure that we also answer any questions that you might have had. So if you have anything, feel free to jump in. Also, feel free to kind of come up to us after this, during the coffee breaks. Happy to chat, online, offline. We don't charge for consultations. We like to talk to people. We like to make sure that we can provide them with the info that we have available. And then if there's anything, obviously, that you're going to need in the long term, we'll also support. So let us know if you guys got any questions.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.